thank God for this day, the 16th of January, the third Sunday of the year, but more importantly, Mission Sunday. And we're grateful to God for Mission Sunday. Today, our Sunday school lesson is the laws of justice and mercy. Certainly, we'll find this lesson a little interesting. And that is the title simply for the precepts for living. What's your other title that you have? The same? Okay. The laws of justice and mercy. Our scripture reference is the first 12 verses of Exodus chapter number 23. The first 12 verses of Exodus chapter number 23. There are four things that our instructor or writer of our lesson wants us to highlight. Number one, 5 judicial imperatives in verse 1 through 3. 5 judicial imperatives in verse 1 through 3. In verses 4 through 6, 2 case studies. 2 case studies in verse 4 through 6. And then we're going to see in verse 7 through 9, 5 more judicial imperatives. 5 more judicial imperatives in verse 7 through 9. And then we're going to conclude on the Sabbath year of verse 10 and 12. Verse 10 and 12. Today, I want to invite you and welcome you. You don't have to rise, but I will welcome you to the courtroom of Exodus chapter 23. For you to understand this lesson, it is that of, or paints the picture of a courtroom. Now, the courtroom is based on a covenant that was made between God and the children of Israel. Now, understand, when you're dealing with a covenant, you are not forced to take part. It is something that you're willing to do. It's not something that you're forced to do. Something that you can choose to do. Now understand, there is a code for the covenant. There is a code for the covenant. And that begins in Exodus chapter 20, verse 22, all the way down to Exodus 23, verse 33. I'll say that again, just in case those of you who are writing. There is a covenant code of Exodus chapter 20, verse 22, beginning at chapter 20, verse 22, all the way down to chapter 23, verse 33. And this is what we would consider the book of the covenant. It is where we would get a detailed descriptions of the 10 Commandments. It is the 10 Commandments that Moses wrote on the mountain of Mount Sinai. And there, God instructs him and gives him direction on how we ought to have a relationship with God. But then, how we ought to also have a relationship with one another. I'll say that again. The 10 Commandments are guidelines or instructions or directions that give us information on how we ought to treat God, number one. But then, I want y'all to look at my hands, how we treat God, number one, but then how we treat each other, number two. These are the picture of the 10 Commandments. I hope y'all get what I'm saying. The 10 Commandments are to help us how to treat God and then treat one another. Now, the issue is that Israel did not really understand that this was not a one-sided relationship, which means that God was supposed to do what he was going to do, and they were not going to do what they were supposed to do. And oftentimes, I can't wait to get to my sermon today, because oftentimes that's how we have the mindset. that God is supposed to bless us. God is supposed to keep us. God is supposed to cover us. God is supposed to make ways, do this, do that, give us victory over enemies, give us jobs that we don't earn or deserve, always blessing us with financial blessings and all this. We want from God, but we never find the time or have the mindset to do to God or for him. And so, here in this courtroom, there's a case. And sometimes we need to address the case just like our lesson today. First of all, we must see the 5 judicial imperatives in verse 1 through 3. If you have a pen, you'll be my friend. Because you're going to have to write some stuff that I want you to get. All right? Verse 1 through 3. Verse 1 through 3. Verse 1 says, thou shalt not. Underline that. Thou literally means you. You shall not. You shall not. You shall not. God is speaking to who? All right. You shall not. Number 1, raise a false witness or false report, better yet. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. Now, pay attention to this, brothers and sisters. This is to address the 9th commandment. The 9th commandment is thou shalt not kill. But when you are finding yourself in the courtroom and you're called to the witness stand after someone has killed, what he's literally saying is don't try to cover somebody else's mistake up. Now, pay attention now. Don't do it harshly. Do it lovingly. He says that we're in the courtroom and somebody has been raised or called to the witness stand. And he says, don't be a false witness. He says, don't try to cover up somebody's wickedness. Don't try to cover up somebody's murder. You don't have to, watch this, do it in a hateful way. You don't have to point your finger, raise all kind of hell, and use all type of language to deal with it. But you ought to be able to do it in love. All right? Thou shalt not raise a false report. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Thou shalt not raise. I want y'all to stay, keep that, put your pen right there. Put your pen right there. Put your pen right there. And when also it talks about stay away from the wicked to be an unrighteous witness, and that's the real issue. You got to learn who to stay away from. The idea is that if you're not careful, you'll be guilty in the courtroom for gossiping. and every now and then when you gossip, you exaggerate, you fabricate, you kind of stretch and twist as if, and the reality is, if you weren't there, shut up. I wasn't supposed to tell you shut up, I'm sorry. You understand, all right. He says, here it is. Don't put one's hand with the wicked. As said in the second part of the verse, refers to the working together with another to pervert the course of justice, to deprive the innocent individual of his rights. Be careful in opening up your mouth thinking you know what you're talking about, because you don't know the whole truth and you don't know what is true. So you might as well be quiet, because there's one guilty and then there's one innocent. But you don't know which one it is. So you might as well, guess what? Stay out of it. Okay, shut up. Okay. All right. So we got the first thou shalt not, right? Verse 2, thou shalt not again. Underline that. Thou shalt not. You shall not. Who's he talking to? Okay, all right. You shall not, here it is, follow a multitude to do evil. Didn't I just tell you, watch the company you keep? That's what mama say, watch the company you keep. You don't hang around everybody. He says, watch this, follow not the multitude to do evil. Now, pay attention to that word, the multitude. The multitude. Now, when we started this discipleship almost a year ago, we almost done, by the way. I saw that. We almost done. Hallelujah. But I noticed that when Jesus got to the mountain to teach, to sit down, before he got to the mountain, he was surrounded by the multitude. But when he got to the mountain and sat down, started teaching and speaking to the disciples, the multitude was gone. And the idea is, be careful of always following the majority. That's the idea. I hope I'm talking to some folks. Be careful in always following the majority, because the majority sometimes are up to no good. Stay with me. Here's the third one. Thou shalt. He already told you what not to do. Now he's telling you what to do. Thou shalt speak in a cause to decline after many to reset judgment. Here it is. The word decline. Thou shalt speak in a cause to decline. It literally means to turn aside. It means to turn aside toward their opinion. Turn away from the multitude's opinion. And what you ought to do, watch this, after many will pervert their judgment. Don't listen to everybody else's thinking. Learn how to kind of turn your back towards that. Are y'all with me? So here it is, verse 3. I'm just trying to rush, tap, and keep going. Neither shall thou countenance a poor man in his cause. Now pay attention to this. This is going to possibly cause some controversy. He says, neither shall you countenance a poor man in his cause. Countenance literally means honor. Be careful, listen to what he's saying, of honoring a poor man in his cause. Now, the poor you will have always, but you don't always know the cause of why they're poor. Some lost jobs, some drastic things have literally happened. But then there's some, if you go downtown, they'll tell you the story. They just choose to be in that cause. The poor you have always. Of course, the Lord wants us to always take care of the poor. That's fine. But he says, don't be careful in honoring those who are poor. God Almighty, this is controversial. I see you looking at me differently. In other words, don't be partial or show favoritism, which, watch this, perverts justice, but specifies both rich and poor. Here it is. The sympathy for a poor man should not be allowed to influence justice any more than partially for the rich man, being partial to the rich man might subvert justice. Be careful, just because a man's rich, to be nice to him. But then just also be careful, because a man's poor, to honor them as well. Are y'all understanding what I'm saying? All right, let me move forward. If thou, I think I got to give you the second point. All right, 2 case studies in verse 4 through 6. I'm almost done, I promise you. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, here it is. Thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. If thou See the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. Pay attention to this, y'all. It goes from now how to treat your enemies. Pay attention to this. Your enemies are someone who don't like you, can't stand you. We already know that. We got enemies. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. But here's what the expectation is. Now, this must be important. Steve, it must be so important that we know what Jesus says how to treat our enemies in the New Testament. But it got to be so important that he ends up talking about it in the Old Testament. So throughout the Bible, again, it's about how we treat one another. He says, if your ox, or if your enemy's, it's not yours, but if your enemy's ox or his ass goes astray, thou shalt surely bring it back again. Here it is. In modern day times, if your enemy has a flat tire, don't tell him that's what you get, sucker. Pull over and help him. Give him a hand. At least wait for him, call AAA or something. So the idea is, here it is. He says, bring it back to him again. Then he says, verse 5, that ain't good enough. Here it is. If thou, now pay attention to this. When he says if thou, he says if you. If is a contingency, but it's based on who? You. All right? If you see the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. If you see somebody who has an issue with what they're trying to do, he says give them some help. Give somebody the helping hand. All right, let me move forward. Not only does it tell us the 5 judicial imperatives, but the 2 case studies, and then it gives us 5 more imperatives. All right, here it is, verse 6, 7 through 9. He says, watch this, keep thee far from a false matter. That goes back to verse 1 when it talks about the murder. Don't be no false witness. Don't get yourself involved. He said, keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not. For I will not justify the wicked. And thou shalt take no gift, no bribe, for the gift or for the bride blindeth the wise, and perverteth, the words of the righteous. Also thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger. Here's the reason why. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. He says, verse 7, he says, he's now dealing with or addressing corrupt judges who put vulnerable people at a great disadvantage. Instead of helping them up, they want to keep them down. Does that sound familiar? He says there are 2 types of poor in this section. Number 1 is one that we very much know, the basic term of being poor. But in verse number 6, it refers to an extremely needy person in danger of oppression and abuse, someone who is destitute and or indignant. And he tells us, brothers and sisters, keep away from false matters. Make sure you do like Job, shun from evil. When evil show up, run the other way. Run and run quick, like Jesus told Judas, go and go quickly. He says, and the innocent and righteous kill thou not. Here it is. If you stay out the mess, you don't have to worry about the consequences of the mess. He says, for I will not justify, I will not pardon or rescue or stand for the wicked. He says in verse number 8, don't take no bribe, for bribes blindeth those who are wise and perverteth the words of the righteous. Bribes know how to change you. He says, the reason why he says, also thou shalt not oppress a stranger. Don't be, he says, as it relates to oppressing, don't take advantage of them. Don't pervert justice or become cruel, treat them cruel. Don't just treat anybody any old kind of way. Like when we get visitors here, you just don't treat nobody no type of way. He says the reason why you don't, because you know the heart. You know what it's like to be somewhere and you don't know nobody. You know what it's like not to have friends. You know what it's like to show up and nobody really want to talk to you. You just new and you're odd looking maybe. You're out of place. And you know, y'all understand. And so what happens is he says, be careful. Here it is. Be careful how you treat them, because you know when you were in your same situation how people treated you. Because while you were in Egypt, you had taskmasters. While you were in Egypt, you were considered a slave. While you were in Egypt, you had to suffer. So why, since God has brought you out, why you got to treat somebody like you were once treated? Here, I'm done. The Sabbath year, verse 10 through 10:1. All right, praise the Lord. 10 through 12. And the 6th year thou shalt sow thy land, and thou shalt gather in the fruits thereof. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, that the poor of thy people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yard. Pay attention to this, brothers and sisters, and I'm done, I promise you. The 6th year, he says, thou shalt sow in the land. Do some work. Plant your crops. Do what you got to do. And after you sow, here it is, during that same season, harvest time, you're going to have to gather it. All right? If you ain't sow nothing, don't worry about gathering nothing. All right? But look at what they said, what he says in verse 11. But the 7th year, thou shalt let it rest. Watch it. Watch it. It's talking about the ground. Pay attention to this. God is really smart. He does some sense. He says in the 6th year, plant and gather. But in the 7th year, let it alone. Let it rest. When you rest, you're recharging. When you rest, you're refreshing. When you rest, you're replenishing. Are y'all with me? So God is so interesting, Miss E, that he set the standard that 6 days of the week we ought to work, but on the 7th day to rest. That's what he said. But not only should we rest, but the ground. Because here it is, if you keep on digging the ground, you'll keep digging and the nutrients and the nourishment will not be there. Let it alone. That's what he said. He says, let it rest, but watch this. He says, after the 7th year you let it rest, here it is, the poor, thy people may eat. And when they leave the beasts, or when they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. Here it is. If you learn how to let things rest, you'll have things for somebody else. Pay attention to that. As long as we keep going, we take everything. And we diminish its value. Pay attention to that. But he says, when we let it rest on the seventh year, guess who gets to eat? The poor and the beast. Are y'all hearing me? He says, watch this, and do your vineyard the same way. He says, but on the sixth day, thou shalt do thy work. And on the seventh day, thou shalt rest. Here it is. That thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thine handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed. Here it is. Sit down, so everybody else can sit down in your household, that everybody will be able, when it's time to go up and get up, to be refreshed. Now, I got to give you one thing, and I'm done. The three words used for resting in this verse have a similar nuance meanings. Here it is. The first one, he says, you shall rest or cease from labor. The second one, he says, the ox and the ass shall rest or settle down and enjoy a quiet place. But then lastly, the third is that the handmaid and the foreigner may be refreshed. Allow someone to take a breather. This word is from the same root as a Hebrew word for breath or spirit. It is a pause to catch your breath and perhaps to see to the rejuvenation of your soul rather than just your body. And this is your word, your Sunday school for today. God bless you and God keep you. Listen, today is Mission Sunday. We're excited about it. I pray that you have your Mission Day offering ready. You know what it is. You know what we're asking. It's nothing new. So don't act like it's a shock or a surprise, please. But listen, brother, listen, my sister. We're getting ready for worship. I want you to consecrate and get ready. If you have not followed the homework or heard the homework, that's because of you. But I'm going to tell you anyway, here's your homework. You can kind of do it just before class. You know, that's how we used to do it. When we get to school, we do the homework real fast before the teacher, collects all the paperwork. So here it is. Read Luke chapter 10. I'm going to focus on verse 38 to 42. But if you look at the whole chapter, you'll be able to understand what Mission Sunday is about. But I really want to focus on Mary and Martha. Today, I want to talk to you from the title, thought, and theme, get to the good part. Get to the good part, all right? God bless you and God keep you. God loves you, so do I. Let's get ready for worship.